The old outpost stood silent in the middle of the barren alien desert, its walls broken and its towers leaning like tired bones. Most people avoided this place. They said it was haunted, that strange shadows lived in the corridors. But Ethan did not care about the whispers. He was a scavenger, and scavengers went wherever they had to, even into the dark. He moved carefully through the dust, his boots crunching against the cracked floor. The air smelled of rust and something older, like ash left from a fire long forgotten. His small light cut through the shadows, showing him scraps of metal, broken machines, and the bones of walls that once held power. Ethan thought he might find spare parts here, maybe something he could sell back on the trade routes. But then he heard it. At first, it was soft, almost like the wind. A low sound, heavy with pain. Ethan stopped, his breath caught in his chest. It was not the sound of wind. It was a voice, a cry, a whimper. Something alive was here. He turned his light toward the noise. The beam touched broken doors, black corners, and piles of rubble. The sound came again, longer this time, trembling. A voice chained in fear. Ethan's heart beat faster. No one was supposed to be alive here. Step by step, he followed the sound. Deeper inside. The hall narrowed, and the darkness grew heavier. Then his light fell on a door, thick and made of iron, scarred with old battle marks. The cry came from behind it. He pushed the door, and it groaned as if the metal itself had been asleep. Inside, the room was small and cold. Chains hung from the ceiling and walls, thick chains that clinked softly with every movement. And in the middle of the room, on the floor, something stirred. It was not just an animal. It was not just a person. It was both. The figure was curled against the wall, arms and legs bound in heavy chains. Her skin was pale, marked with strange patterns that glowed faintly in the light. Her hair fell long, tangled, almost wild, and her eyes, when they lifted to meet Ethan's, burned with a mix of fear and fury. Ethan froze. She looked like a beast from the old war stories, a creature bred for violence. Her teeth glimmered sharp when she hissed at him, and her hands, though chained, flexed as if ready to strike. But then he noticed something else. Her body shook. Her breathing was ragged, and her eyes, those fierce, glowing eyes, were wet with tears. Ethan felt something move inside him. This was no monster. This was someone trapped, someone who had been broken for too long. He stepped closer, slow and careful. The girl's chains rattled as she tried to move back, pressing herself against the wall. "Stay away," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Like stone rubbed against stone, Ethan kept his light low, his hands open. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "I just want to help." Her eyes narrowed. "Help." She laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. It was bitter, broken. "They all said that before. Then they chained me." Ethan's heart tightened. Okay, whoever had done this saw her as nothing but a weapon, a beast to be locked away. But standing here in front of him, she looked more like a prisoner than a monster. He knelt slowly, lowering himself so he wouldn't seem like a threat. "You're not a beast," he said. You're scared, aren't you?" For a moment, her breathing stopped. She stared at him, confusion flickering through her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her and seen more than the chains. Ethan reached forward, his fingers brushing against one of the heavy chains around her wrist. The cold metal felt almost alive, pulsing with strange energy. The girl gasped, pulling back, but his touch had already started something. The chain trembled. Ethan frowned, staring. The links shimmered faintly, then cracked. A small light glowed between the metal, as if his touch had awakened something hidden inside. The girl's eyes widened. What did you do?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, his voice low. Almost afraid, I just touched it. The chain broke with a sharp snap, falling to the floor like dead weight. The sound echoed in the small room, and both of them stared at the broken metal. For the first time, her eyes filled with something other than fear. Hope. She leaned forward, her voice trembling. Do it again, she whispered. Ethan hesitated. But the way she looked at him like he was the first light she had seen in years gave him no choice. He touched another chain. It too cracked and shattered, as if it had been waiting for him. The girl stared at him in disbelief. No one could break these chains, she whispered. Not even I. Ethan swallowed hard, his hand shaking. Then maybe you weren't meant to break them yourself. In the silence that followed, the truth hung heavy between them. This was not just a rescue. This was something bigger, something neither of them could yet understand. And in that broken, dark room, the first bond between a human and the chained alien girl was born. Asterisk, the sound of the broken chains still echoed in the small room. Pieces of metal lay scattered on the floor like dead snakes. And the girl's trembling hands rubbed the places where iron had bitten into her skin for so long. Ethan stood frozen, his chest rising and falling fast. Not sure if he had made a mistake or done something right. The girl raised her head, her glowing eyes fixed on him. For a moment, he thought she would attack. Her teeth showed slightly, sharp like an animal's. Her nails scraped against the stone floor as if she wanted to claw her way free of him. Ethan tensed, but then he noticed something different. She was shaking, not with rage, but with weakness. Her body was thin, her face pale. The chains had not just kept her prisoner. They had drained her life away. She had been called a beast, but now Ethan saw the truth. She was tired, broken, and starving. You should run, she said, her voice rough, almost broken. If you stay, they will find you. They will find me, and they will kill you for this. Ethan shook his head. No, I'm not leaving you here. She tilted her head, confusion in her gaze. No one had ever said those words to her before. People feared her, hated her, wanted her gone. But this human? He looked at her as if she was more than chains and glowing eyes. He stepped closer, slowly, his boots crunching on the metal shards. What's your name? He asked softly. The question seemed to hit her harder than the breaking of the chains. She blinked at him, her mouth opening and closing like she had forgotten how to answer. My name. Her voice shook. They called me beast. They called me monster. They called me curse. Ethan shook his head. That's not a name. That's what they wanted you to believe. But I'm asking you, what's your name? The girl swallowed, her eyes lowering for a moment as if digging through old memories. Finally, she whispered, almost afraid. Lyra. Ethan smiled softly. Lyra. That's a beautiful name. Her eyes lifted again, wide and shining. No one had ever said her name was beautiful. No one had ever even spoken it kindly. Something inside her cracked, but it was not painful. It was like the first breath after drowning. But the moment of peace did not last. The sound of heavy boots echoed. In the corridor outside, shouts and alien tongues bounced off the stone walls. The guards were coming back. Lyra's body stiffened. Fear flashed across her face, but it quickly hardened into anger. They will put me back in chains, she hissed. Her nails dug into the floor. Run now, human. You can still escape. Ethan's heart pounded. He should have run. He should have left when he first heard the cries, but he couldn't. Not after seeing her eyes. Not after hearing her name. He knelt beside her, pulling one last chain free from her ankle. If they try to chain you again, he said firmly, they'll have to go through me first. Lyra's eyes widened. The guards' voices grew louder. The door rattled as someone tried to force it open. Lyra looked at Ethan as if she wanted to believe him, but didn't know how. The door burst open. 3 alien guards stormed inside, tall and armored, their weapons raised. Their eyes glowed with anger when they saw the broken chains and the humans standing beside her. "Step away from the beast," one shouted. Ethan stood tall, his fists clenched, though he had no weapon. "She's not a beast," he said, his voice steady. "She's Lyra." The guards laughed, a cruel, metallic sound. They lifted their weapons, ready to strike. Lyra hissed, her body tensing like a cornered animal, but her chains were gone now. Her muscles coiled, her nails sharp, her eyes burning bright. Before the guards could fire, Lyra leaped. She moved like lightning, faster than Ethan had ever seen. Her claws ripped through the first guard's weapon, sending sparks flying. The second stumbled back, but she spun and kicked him into the wall. Ethan ducked as a bolt of energy hissed past his head. He grabbed a broken chain from the floor and swung it with all his strength, striking the third guard's arm. The weapon clattered away. Lyra finished the rest, breathing hard but standing free, no longer bound. The room fell silent except for Ethan's heavy breaths and Lyra's low growls. She stood tall, her hair wild, her glowing eyes locked on him. For a moment, she looked every bit the beast they had called her. But then, her chest rose and fell, her growls softened, and she whispered, almost like a secret, "You fought for me." Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, nodding. "I told you. You're not a beast." Her body shook again, but this time, not from weakness, from something else. Something like hope. She had always thought humans were just as cruel as her captors, but this one had freed her. This one had called her by her name. She stepped closer, her chains dragging faintly against the ground. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time he realized the truth. "Because you looked at me," he said simply, "and I saw a person, not a monster." Lyra's lips parted. She stared at him as if those words were something she had never dreamed of hearing. Her hands trembled, but she did not pull away when he reached out again. His touch, gentle and unafraid, brushed her arm. She flinched at first, then froze. His hand was warm. His touch was real. And for the first time in years, she did not feel like a beast. In that moment, something new began inside her. Something stronger than chains. The alien guards lay defeated on the cold floor, their weapons broken, their armor cracked. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only with the sound of Lyra's fast breathing and Ethan's pounding heart. For a brief moment, they were safe. But Ethan knew it would not last. Lyra stood tall, her glowing eyes scanning the room. She was free now, but freedom had a price. The chains were broken, yet the world outside still saw her as a danger, a curse that had to be locked away. She turned to Ethan, her voice low but steady. "They will not stop. More will come. They always come." Ethan nodded. "Then we need to leave before they surround this place." Lyra tilted her head, studying him with suspicion. "Why do you keep staying by my side? You've already risked enough. If you leave now, maybe they will let you live." Ethan looked at her, his jaw tightening. "If I walk away now, I'll leave you 2 chains again. I won't do that." Eyes softened, though only for a second, before the sound of alarms shattered the moment. Red lights flashed through the corridor outside, and a harsh voice in the alien language echoed through hidden speakers. Ethan didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. They had been discovered. Lyra moved quickly, pulling Ethan toward the hallway. She moved with a mix of grace and fury, her bare feet almost silent against the floor, while Ethan stumbled to keep up. The outpost that once felt empty now pulsed with lifeguards rushing in, sirens screaming, doors sealing shut. The whole place had become a cage. They turned into a narrow passage, shadows dancing along the walls. Ethan's lungs burned as he ran, but Lyra did not slow. Her strength was returning, and though her body still carried scars of captivity, her spirit now burned brighter than ever. She glanced back at him, her voice urgent. "Stay close. If you fall behind, they will take you too." "I'm not letting go," Ethan replied, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. Ahead, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. It was once a docking bay, now abandoned except for broken ships and piles of scrap. Ethan's eyes widened. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way out from here. But the hope was short-lived. Dozens of armored figures poured in from every entrance. Weapons raised, their glowing eyes locked on the pair. They were surrounded. Ethan's chest tightened. He had no weapon, no plan, just his hands and his will. He turned to Lyra. "What now?" Lyra stood still, her head lowering, her hair falling across her glowing eyes. Her claws flexed at her sides. For a moment, she looked like the beast they feared. But Ethan saw something more resolve. She was not fighting for blood. She was fighting for freedom. The leader of the guards stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "Beast, surrender. You will not escape. The human cannot save you." Lyra raised her head, her voice sharp as a blade. "I am not a beast. My name is Lyra, and I will never kneel again." The guards moved as one, charging. Blaster fire filled the air, blue bolts cracking against the walls. Ethan ducked behind a broken crate, his ears ringing. Lyra moved like fire, faster than the eye could follow. She leaped, clawed, and struck, her chains now turned into weapons in her hands. Ethan's heart raced. She was strong, yes, but there were too many. They would be overwhelmed. His eyes darted to the wreckage of a small transport ship. Smoke curled from its engines, but its hatch hung open. "A chance, Lyra!" he shouted over the chaos. "There's a ship." Her eyes flicked toward where he pointed. She hissed, slashing one guard aside. Together, they pushed through the storm of enemies. Every step, a fight. Every breath, a battle. Ethan swung a loose pipe, knocking one guard away, while Lyra tore through another. The galaxy might have called her a monster, but tonight, she was his shield. Finally, they reached the ship. Ethan scrambled inside, hitting controls he barely understood. Lights flickered, systems coughed awake, as if the machine itself had been waiting for one last flight. Lyra jumped in beside him, her body glowing faintly from the energy of her unleashed power. The guards surrounded the ship, pounding against its hull, shouting for them to stop. Ethan's fingers danced desperately across the panel until finally, the engines roared. Dust and fire filled the bay. The ship lurched forward, smashing through the broken doors and into the night sky. Ethan collapsed back in his seat, gasping for air. He looked at Lyra. She sat beside him, her hands still trembling, her eyes watching the stars as they spread before her. For the first time in years, she was outside the cage. Free, but freedom was not safety. The galaxy had marked her as dangerous. A creature to fear, and now a human had helped her escape. Every Empire ship would be hunting them. Every world warned about the beast, girl, and her human. Ethan knew it. Lyra knew it. The whole galaxy would now stand against them. But in that small, broken ship, under the endless stars, Ethan whispered the truth that mattered most. "We'll face them together." Lyra turned her glowing eyes toward him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, she whispered back, "Together." And in that word, a promise was born. Asterisk, the small ship rattled as it tore through the clouds, its engines coughing like an old beast refusing to die. Ethan gripped the controls with white knuckles, praying the machine would not fall apart mid-air. Beside him, Lyra sat silent, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars rushing past the cracked window. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was the growl of the engines and Ethan's nervous breathing. He kept stealing glances at her. She looked fierce, wild hair, sharp teeth, eyes that burned in the dark. But now, free of the chains, she also looked tired, as if the weight of the galaxy still pressed down on her shoulders. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Where should we go? Do you know any place safe?" Lyra's lips tightened. "Safe? There is no such place for me. Wherever I go, they see a monster. They see the curse they created." Ethan frowned, his hand steadying the ship. "Created." She nodded slowly, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I was not born this way. I was made." Ethan turned to her, his eyes wide. She kept her gaze on the stars as she spoke, her words heavy with years of pain. "My people once had a royal line. I was born to that line, born as a princess of my clan, but they wanted more. They wanted a weapon to protect the throne. They took me when I was a child, changed my blood, twisted my body. They made me strong, fast, and terrifying. But they also made me hate it. My own people feared me. My family locked me away, until one day, even they gave me up. The Empire chained me. And the rest of the galaxy called me Beast." Her hands trembled in her lap, claws curling against her own skin. She forced a bitter laugh. "A princess turned into a monster. That is my story." Ethan's chest tightened. He thought of the girl he had seen chained in the dark, crying when no one could hear. He thought of the way she whispered her name, as if afraid to speak it. And now, he saw not just a beast, but a girl robbed of everything: home, family, freedom. "You're not a monster," he said softly. "You're Lyra." She turned to him, her glowing eyes narrowing. "How can you be so sure? You saw what I did to those guards. You saw how I fight. I am death to anyone near me." Ethan shook his head. "No. You fight because you were forced to. You survived because they gave you no choice. That doesn't make you a beast. That makes you strong." Her breath caught, her lips parting slightly. No one had ever said those words. Strong, yes, but never in a way that meant hope. Always as a warning, always as fear. She looked away quickly, her voice trembling. "You don't know me. You don't know what sleeps inside me. The more I use this power, the less I feel like myself. Sometimes when I fight, I forget my name. I forget I was ever a girl. All that remains is the beast they made." Ethan reached out, slowly, carefully, until his hand rested on hers. She stiffened, her claws twitching, but she did not pull away. His touch was gentle, steady, the same touch that had broken her chains. "Then I'll remind you," he said. "Every time you forget who you are, I'll be here to remind you. You're Lyra. Not beast, not curse, just Lyra." Her eyes shimmered. A glow softer now, no longer burning with rage, but flickering with something new, something fragile. For the first time in years, she let someone's hand stay in hers without fear. The ship shook violently, snapping them back to reality. A warning. Light flashed red across the panel. Ethan cursed under his breath, trying to keep the ship steady. "We're running low on power. If we don't land soon, we'll fall out of the sky." Lyra pointed through the window. Ahead lay a stretch of dark forest on the edge of a broken world. "Their land. There. The trees will hide us." Ethan nodded, guiding the ship down. The landing was rough, metal grinding and sparks flying as the old Machines scraped across the ground before collapsing against the roots of massive alien trees. Smoke curled from its engines, but the hole held. They climbed out, the night air cool and damp around them. Strange glowing plants lit the forest floor, and the cries of distant creatures echoed like whispers in the dark. Ethan staggered, catching his breath, while Lyra stood tall, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows here in the wild silence. She looked less like a beast and more like a lost queen in exile. Ethan sat on a rock, wiping sweat from his forehead. So what now? Lyra looked at him, her hair catching the pale light. Now we run. The Empire will hunt me, and now they will hunt you too. You chose this. Ethan smiled faintly, even through his exhaustion. Yeah, I guess I did. Lyra stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, a small smile touched her lips quick. Fragile, but real. You're a fool, human, she whispered. But maybe you're my fool. The words hung between them, strange and warm, like a spark in the cold forest. For Ethan, it was enough. For Lyra, it was the first step back toward being more than what the galaxy had forced her to be. And deep inside, for the first time since her chains were broken, she began to believe she could be more than the beast. She could be Lyra again. The forest was alive with whispers. Strange glowing insects drifted through the air like tiny stars. And the trees loomed tall, their roots curling like the fingers of giants. For a moment, Ethan and Lyra found peace in the quiet. But peace never lasted long. Ethan gathered wood for a small fire while Lyra crouched nearby, her glowing eyes watching the shadows. She was restless, her claws twitching every time a branch cracked or a creature called in the distance. She could feel it in her bones. The Empire would not let her escape so easily. They're coming, she said at last, her voice low. Ethan looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. How do you know? Lyra's eyes narrowed, fixed on the darkness between the trees. I was hunted my whole life. You learn to feel it. The air grows heavy, the silence bends. The hunters always come. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was only imagining things. But deep down, he knew she was right. The Empire had called her a beast, a curse, a weapon. They would never stop until they had her in chains again. That night, it did not sleep. By dawn, the forest was filled with a low hum. Ethan woke from a half-dream to find Lyra standing on a rock, her hair whipping in the wind, her body tense. Then he heard it too, the unmistakable thrum of engines. He rushed to her side. Ships, she nodded. Hunters, not soldiers. Worse. Through the gaps in the trees, Ethan saw the sky flash with lights. Small, sleek craft flew in formation, their wings sharp, their engines glowing red. Unlike the heavy warships of the Empire, these were fast and deadly. They were made for pursuit. Lyra's lips curled into a snarl. They send the hounds. The ship swept low, releasing mechanical beasts that landed with thunderous weight. Their bodies were black metal, their eyes burning red. They moved like wolves, sniffing the ground, their claws digging deep into the soil. Ethan's heart sank. He had seen machines before, but never like this. These were built for one thing: hunting. Lyra turned to him, her expression hard. Stay close to me. If they catch your scent, they will not stop. The first of the machines howled, a piercing sound that shook the trees. Then the pack moved. Ethan ran with Lyra through the forest, his lungs burning, his legs straining to keep up. With her inhuman speed, branches whipped at his face. Roots threatened to trip him, but he kept running. Behind them, the hunters crashed through the undergrowth. Fast, relentless, their glowing eyes never losing the trail. One leaped forward. Now, Wang leaped forward, jaws of steel snapping shut inches from Ethan's back. He stumbled, but Lyra spun, her claws flashing. With one strike, she tore into the machine's throat, sparks flying as it collapsed. But more came, their red eyes blazing brighter. "Ethan, move," she shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him along. They burst into a clearing where an ancient stone ruin stood half buried in vines. The broken walls offered no shelter, but Ethan saw something: a tunnel. Dark and narrow, leading underground. "There," he gasped, pointing. Lyra dragged him inside just as the hunters burst into the clearing. The tunnel was tight, the air damp and cold, but it slowed the machines. Their large bodies scraped against the walls, sparks flying as they forced their way in. Lyra spun again, her claws tearing through another. The sound of metal breaking echoed through the tunnel, but the pack still pressed forward. Ethan swung a heavy rock, smashing the glowing eye of one machine. For a brief moment, it felt like they could fight. But then, a deeper sound shook. The ground, heavy footsteps. Ethan froze as a new figure stepped into the ruin above the tunnel. This one was not like the others. It was tall, armored in black plates with a helmet shaped like a skull. A hunter, not machine, but flesh and blood stood above them. In his hands was a long spear glowing with energy. His voice rumbled like thunder. "Beast, your escape ends here." Lyra's eyes narrowed, her body trembling with fury. She shoved Ethan back deeper into the tunnel. "Stay behind me." The hunter leaped down with terrifying speed. His spear struck the ground. Where? Lyra had stood a second before, sending cracks racing across the stone. She dodged, claws flashing, striking at his armor. Sparks flew, but the plates held strong. Ethan's heart pounded. He wanted to help, but what could he do against such a monster? He searched the ground, grabbing a broken chain half buried in the dirt. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lyra and the hunter clashed again and again. Their movements too fast for Ethan's eyes to follow. Her claws scraped against his armor. His spear sliced the air around her. Each strike shook the tunnel. Walls she fought like fire, but Ethan could see if this was no ordinary enemy. He had been trained to kill her. Finally, the hunter caught her with a heavy blow, slamming the spear against her side. Lyra stumbled, falling to one knee, blood glimmering faintly against her skin. "No!" Ethan shouted, rushing forward. The hunter turned, his skull-like mask glaring down at him. "The human dares," he sneered. Ethan swung the broken chain with all his strength, wrapping it around the hunter's arm. The move was clumsy, desperate. But it gave Lyra a moment. She rose with a snarl, her claws glowing faintly with energy Ethan had never seen before. With a roar, she struck, tearing through the weak point of his armor at the neck. The hunter froze. His spear dropping, then collapsed in a heap of broken metal and flesh. Lyra panted heavily, blood dripping from her side. She turned to Ethan, her eyes blazing. "Fool," she whispered, her voice both angry and soft. "You nearly died." Ethan gripped the broken chain, his chest heaving. "So did you." For a moment, they just stared at each other, their breaths heavy in the dark. Tunnel, around them, the last of the machines twitched and died. The pack was broken for now, but they both knew more would come. The Empire would never stop. The hunters would never rest. And together, they had only begun to face the storm. The tunnel walls shook with the echo of battle. Broken machines lay scattered, their glowing eyes fading into darkness. The body of the hunter slumped against the stone, his black armor cracked open. Smoke rose from shattered wires, and the smell of burnt metal filled the air. Ethan leaned against the wall, chest heaving, his hands scraped and bruised from swinging the chain. His heart hammered so loud he could barely hear. For a moment, he thought it was over. But then he saw her. Lyra stood in the center of the tunnel, her body trembling, blood dripping slowly down her side where the spear had struck her. Her glowing eyes flickered, dimming for the first time since he had freed her. She tried to take a step forward, but her knees buckled, and she caught herself against the wall. Lyra. Ethan rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. Her skin was burning hot, her breath ragged. Up close, he could see the strange glow under her skin, the unnatural fire that the Empire had forced into her veins. It pulsed wildly, out of control, as if tearing her apart from the inside. She pushed weakly at him with her clawed hand. "Stay back. I can't control it." Her voice cracked, her words half a snarl. "When this power takes me, I lose. Myself, if you touch me now, I don't know what I'll become." Ethan looked at her, his jaw tightening. He could see it, her fear wasn't of death, but of herself. She was terrified that she would hurt him, that the beast inside would break free completely. But Ethan shook his head. "No, you're not a beast. You're Lyra, and I'm not letting you fall to this." Before she could resist, he placed his hand firmly against her arm. The world seemed to stop. The glow under her skin flared, wild and violent, but instead of lashing out, it surged into his touch. Ethan felt the heat rush through him like fire. But instead of burning, it steadied. The wild energy calmed, as if his hand was a key unlocking a cage inside her. Lyra gasped, her eyes widening. The beastly glow softened, shifting into a warm, steady light. The claws at her fingertips dulled. Slightly, her sharp teeth lessened. Her body relaxed in his hold, trembling not with rage, but with release. What did you do?" she whispered, staring at him in shock. Ethan held her steady, his thumb brushing against her skin. "I don't know. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's you. Maybe you just needed someone to see you. Not the beast, not the curse, just you." Her glowing eyes shimmered with tears. For years, she had believed she was nothing more than what they made her weapon: monster, curse. But in that moment, in his touch, she felt something different. She felt like Lyra. The tunnel was behind them now, the forest stretching wide beneath a silver glow of alien moons. Ethan and Lyra moved through the shadows together, their steps quiet, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. She was no longer chained, no longer trembling with fear. The beast girl the galaxy had hunted was gone. What remained was something new, something stronger, but the Empire did not rest. News of her escape spread like fire across the stars. Entire fleets were mobilized, and her name Lyra was whispered in fear. They did not call her beast now. They called her a threat to the order of the galaxy. And wherever Ethan and Lyra went, hunters followed. For days they traveled from world to world, hiding in ruins, moving through shadows. Ethan had never been more tired in his life, but Lyra never let him fall behind. She carried him when his legs failed, stood guard while he slept, and fought when the hunters drew near. Each battle drew more attention. Each escape carved her legend deeper into the hearts of those who watched from afar. On one forgotten colony, when the Empire's soldiers closed in, farmers saw Lyra fight. They had been told she was a monster, but what they saw was a girl protecting a human with her life. They spread the story in whispers. The beast is not a beast. She has a name. She is Lyra. The whispers grew. Miners on distant moons spoke her name. Traders carried the tale through hidden routes. Slaves in chains heard it and lifted their heads with hope. The galaxy was changing. And it began with a human who refused to see a monster. One night, in a ruined city lit by the glow of broken towers, Ethan and Lyra found themselves surrounded. Once again, dozens of soldiers poured in from every street, their weapons raised, their voices chanting for her capture. Lyra stood tall, her hair whipping in the wind, her claws ready. She looked at Ethan. This is where it ends. They will not stop. Ethan stepped beside her, gripping a broken spear he had taken from a fallen hunter. His hands shook, but his eyes were steady. Then we don't stop either. If the galaxy wants to see a monster tonight, let them. But they'll also see me standing with you. Her eyes softened, glowing faintly with warmth. Together, she whispered. The soldiers charged. Energy bolts cut through the night. Explosions lit the ruins. But Lyra was not the same girl who had once wept in chains. The fire inside her burned steady now, not wild, but controlled. Each movement was precise, each strike powerful. She tore through their weapons, shattered their armor, and with every blow, she screamed her name. I am Lyra. Her voice echoed over the ruins, carrying through the city, through the night. Into every ear, Ethan fought at her side, striking where he could, standing where others would fall. He was no warrior, but his presence gave her strength. When she faltered, his hand steadied her. When she roared, his voice joined hers. The soldiers fell one by one, their courage breaking. Some dropped their weapons and fled. Others whispered in fear. It was not the beast they saw. It was a queen reborn, her chains shattered, her humanity. Blazing by dawn, the ruins were quiet. The last of the soldiers had retreated, leaving behind their broken weapons and their fear. Smoke curled into the sky as the first light touched the city. Ethan sat on a broken wall, his chest heaving. Lyra stood beside him, blood and dust covering her, but her head held high. She was not hiding anymore. They will tell this story, Ethan said, his voice rough but proud. They'll tell it across the stars, and they'll use your name, not their lies. Lyra turned to him, her glowing eyes softer than he had ever seen. And when they do, they will remember you too. The human who saw me, the human who touched the chains and broke them. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but it's your story, Lyra. The galaxy will learn who you are. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. No, she said firmly. It's our story. Above them, the sun rose over the ruins, casting light across the broken stones. And as it did, across distant worlds, whispers became voices. Voices became shouts. The beast was gone. The curse was gone. Her name was Lyra, and the galaxy would never forget it.